Hello lovelies, willkommen, bienvenue and welcome all to my viewers in the West Country. Alright my liver, it's not as hot, thank goodness, but I'm still catching up on sleep and so on, so those of you who like it get angry, sarcastic, grim for at least another day.
And I write novels.
Yeah, he writes them in crayon.
Though I haven't had any published yet. So I better warn you, I'm in a mean mood.
Well, the internet is an infinite wellspring of vexatious nonsense, so what can we find to get an Englishman to get his dander up today,
Socialism has historically been an ideology of violence, starvation, poverty, and political unrest.
Ah yes, the Sisyphean task of explaining what socialism actually is to Americans online, which I think must be one of the internet labours of Hercules. So you got explaining socialism, reading the comments, keeping a video monetised, posting a nipple successfully on Facebook, debunking 9/11 conspiracies, correcting successfully a mistake on a Wikipedia article, and not being blocked by Steve Shives. I mean, you do have to wonder whether there isn't some cloning facility somewhere churning people like this out, right next to the facility that churns out manic pixie dream girls with gender identity disorder, or maybe somewhere on some private island owned by Rupert Murdoch there's a gigantic greenhouse full of suspiciously large cucumbers. Who knows?
We shall take only the greatest minds, the finest soldiers, the most faithful servants. We shall multiply them 1,000-fold and release them to usher in a new era of glory. Colonel Corazon Santiago, the Council of War.
I think the same facility that used to mass-produce bedroom feminists also mass-produces pretty wingnuts, and then releases them into the wild to see which ones survive, and those that cut the mustard, those get recruited to Fox News. But anyway, let's get back to the task in hand.
Socialism has historically been an ideology of violence, starvation, poverty, and political unrest.
No, socialism historically is the political philosophy and way of looking at politics and society as a whole that has put an end to starvation, that has provided education, that has provided workers' rights, that has provided equality before the law. You're confusing socialism for Marxism. I understand how that can be confusing because Marxists use the term socialism, but socialism predates Marxism. And the kind of socialism that most people are talking about in these instances is the type that you already have in the form of your limited welfare state. The problems that you have in the States are largely to do with the fact that your welfare state is so pitifully small and so many people are so ideologically opposed to the very idea of it. Historically, it's responsible for stability and staving off revolutions and so forth. It's part of the reason Britain has been, up until recently, stable for such a long time through slow, gradual change and the adoption of various socialist policies. You're mistaking it for Marxism.
Yet when it comes to political figures like Bernie Sanders, who adhere to the same political philosophy and who at the end of the day value the same principles for government, today's youth seem to interpret his policies as policies of love and compassion, of equality and justice. So where's the disconnect?
The disconnect is that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. To be fair, a lot of these kids don't either, but when it comes to Bernie Sanders and those like him, they're talking about socialism, not Marxist socialism, okay? So when it comes to Marxist socialism, the concept of socialism under Marxism is one of Marx's stages of history, and it's the one where things tend to go wrong because the massive concentration of state power in one place is ripe for exploitation, corruption, and seizure by a totalitarian, as happened in Venezuela, as happened in China, as happened in the former Soviet Union. So That's Marxism failing. That's a failed state of Marxism. What they're talking about is democratic socialism. Socialism as its own ideology, separate and distinct from Marxism. They're the same in that they're both left-wing philosophies, but that's about as far as it gets. And conflating the socialism of Bernie Sanders with the Marxism of Stalin is as absurd as an anti-capitalist smashing up a little girl's lemonade stand because she's serving the man. It's just nonsense. It's a willful and deliberate attempt to confuse things. It's like calling every right-winger a Nazi. You should understand that, surely.
Why are millennials on average so supportive of a philosophy and of policies that have a track record of so many human rights abuses?
Because they don't? Because they have a record of challenging human rights abuses and increasing people's rights, workers' rights, individual rights, human rights of all sorts tend to be better served in democratically socialist nations, non-Marxist socialist nations. God, I hate having to correct my language to communicate with you people. But so they can see that. They can see that the standard of living in Scandinavian countries is better. They can see that every country with a better healthcare system than the United States has a socialized healthcare system. They can see all these things. They can see that the wealth is concentrating more and more in the top and not being spread around. So little wonder that younger people tend to want a better, fairer, more genuinely progressive society than the one in which they find themselves, which is ardently capitalist in a way that often does lead to abuses, whether it be Flint's water or whether it be Chinese sweatshops.
Well, number one, I think there is a gap in education and historical awareness going on. Studies and polls have shown that millennials aren't aware of socialism's history, the number of people that have died under it, the atrocities leaders have committed in its name, and frankly, they aren't even aware of what socialism really means as a philosophy or how it looks when implemented in government.
Well, you're right, but not in the way that you think. I mean, socialism has been a virtually unbridled success across the West. I would say it's responsible in large part for the quality of life in the West, for our education levels, for our infrastructure, for our scientific accomplishments, for our medical accomplishments. Socialism is synonymous with successful first world Western nations. Even the US, though it tries to hide it and could do with a great deal more. Even the UK, which has spent decades chipping away at its great socialist success stories, apparently trying to make things worse because our governments end up in hock to businesses whose sole motivation is a psychopathic devotion to profit over and above all other considerations, and that's a problem. Now, there are people who overreact to what some people call late-stage capitalism. I think that's gilding the lily more than perhaps a little, but still, there are people who overreact to that and who are arguing for communism, but by muddying the waters and mistaking one for the other, socialism for Marxism, you're not doing yourself any favours, because anyone who takes your advice and does honestly go and look into the history and the consequences will see that socialism is that almost unbridled success. Not that it's murderous or whatever else, they're just going to simply find out that you're lying. But is it ignorance on your part? Who knows? That was an LD50 dose of irony there, talking about people not being educated, not knowing the history and so on. Certainly we should talk about the problems of Stalin and the rest, and we should continue to talk about the problems of Hitler and fascism on the other side of the political spectrum, but equally totalitarian. Of course, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. But that's how all of this sounds a little bit hollow, coming from you when you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I have plenty of videos on this topic because it really cheeses me off. Feel free to avail yourself of them. Zang. Old Fat Punks is part caper, part comedy, part nostalgia and part commentary. It follows three aging punks as they build themselves up for one big, nihilistic last hurrah. You can buy Old Fat Punks at Amazon, Drive-Thru Fiction, or lulu.com. Follow the links below or search on those sites.
As a union man, I'm wise to the lies of the company spies, and I don't get fooled by the factory rules, 'cause I always read between the lines, and I always get my way if I strike for higher